Evan Cole moved through the quiet alien forest with slow, careful steps. The morning air felt cold and clean as he listened to the soft rustling of silver leaves. He had come to this distant world as an explorer and researcher hoping to map local wildlife and study the river systems that shaped the land. Most days were peaceful and calm, but today felt different from the very first moment he woke up. Something in the air felt charged, like the world was holding its breath. Evan walked toward the river to collect water samples when the forest suddenly trembled with a deep, echoing boom. Birds burst from the trees in a wave of bright color. Echoes rolled across the valley until the ground under his feet vibrated. Evan froze. That sound did not belong to thunder or natural storms. It sounded like something crashing through the sky. He looked up and saw a streak of glowing blue smoke cutting through the air above the treetops. It curved downward like a wounded comet. The crash site could not be far. Evan felt a jolt of fear mixed with curiosity. Whatever fell from the sky might be dangerous. But what if someone was hurt? His instincts pushed him forward. He ran toward the smoke as fast as his boots allowed. Branches snapped under his feet. His breath grew heavy as dazzling beams of sunlight filtered through the canopy. The air smelled sharp like burned metal. The closer he got, the stronger the burning scent became. It made his heart race. Then he heard something else. A sound so unexpected that he stopped in his tracks. It was a scream. A young voice full of panic and pain. It came from the river. Evan hurried to the edge and scanned the rushing water. The river here was known as the Wild Current. Locals warned him to stay away because of violent waves and deep spinning pits. No creature survived long in those waters. Evan saw fresh footprints in the mud. Small, light, not human. They led toward the riverbank and then vanished at the edge of a slippery rock. His breath tightened. Someone had slipped into the river. And the scream belonged to them. He heard another cry. High-pitched and trembling, Evan turned and finally saw her. A small alien girl, her skin shimmering with pale violet light, struggled in the raging river. The current tossed her like a leaf, caught in a storm. Her fingers clawed at the water as she gasped for air. Her eyes locked onto Evan with raw terror. She looked no older than 12 in human years. Evan felt a rush of fear. The river was deadly. Even strong adults could not fight its strength. And she was slipping deeper into the center where whirlpools formed. She screamed again as the water dragged her under for a moment, before throwing her back up. Evan knew he had only seconds. His mind raced. The river could kill him easily. He did not have ropes. He did not have support. But he also knew one truth. If he hesitated, she would die. Behind him, another explosion echoed through the forest. He looked back and saw sparks rising from the wrecked object that had crashed earlier. It was shaped like a small shuttle. Its metal body glowed with alien energy. Maybe the girl had been inside it. Maybe she was the only survivor. Evan returned his focus to the river. The girl's voice weakened. Her head dipped again. More water pulled across her body. She was losing strength fast. Evan felt his heartbeat thundering in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to be careful. But his conscience refused to let him watch a child drown. He took a deep breath, stepped to the edge, and kicked off his boots. The ground beneath him trembled as he moved closer. The river roared with a sound that swallowed everything else. The cold wind slapped his face, yet he did not stop. He looked at the girl one last time. She was barely holding on. Her hand reached out toward him, even though she knew he could not hear her over the raging water. Evan whispered to himself, "You can do this. You have to try." The next moment he bent his knees and prepared for the jump that would decide the fate of them both. Just before he leapt, the river pulled the girl under again, leaving only bubbles on the surface. And that single terrifying moment became the push he needed. The cold shock of the river hit Evan the moment he broke through the surface. The water felt like a wall of ice crushing every inch of his skin. For a brief moment, he could not breathe. The river spun him in a wild spiral as if it wanted to rip him apart. Waves surged over his head and forced him under again. When he managed to fight upward, he gasped loudly and searched for the alien girl. He saw her farther ahead across the roaring current. Her small hands reached upward before another violent wave pulled her sideways. Her body turned helplessly as the water dragged her toward a deep swirling pit near the center. The pit was known by locals as the Spiral Gate because anything that entered it never returned. Evan had heard their warnings. Now he was staring at it with his own eyes. A dark spinning vortex formed just behind the girl swallowing water with powerful force. Evan kicked hard and tried to swim toward her. The river kept pushing him away. Every stroke felt like a losing battle. The water smashed into him again and again. He tasted bitterness and metal as he fought to stay above the surface. His muscles shook from the cold and from the terror rising inside him. The girl's head dipped once more. She coughed weakly. She was running out of time. Evan shouted to her, but the river swallowed his voice. The only thing she heard was the thundering roll of water. Yet something in her eyes changed when she spotted him again. For a moment she looked hopeful. Then, a wave crashed between them, and the river spun her around toward the Spiral Gate. Evan felt a jolt of panic. He pushed harder against the water. His arms burned from exhaustion. His vision blurred as the current dragged him downstream. For a moment he wondered if he was insane to be doing this. But the thought of letting the child drown made his heart twist. He could not stop. He shifted his direction and aimed himself at a cluster of rocks rising from the river. If he could reach them, he could use the current in a different angle. The rocks came closer. The water slammed him into the side of one. Sharp edges cut his arm. Pain flared, but he ignored it. He wrapped one hand around the rock and used the force of the current to swing himself outward. That sudden burst of momentum pushed him closer to the girl. She was now only a little distance ahead. Her movements had weakened. Her eyes looked scared and tired. She tried to lift her head, but the water kept pulling her under. Evan reached out his arm. She reached too. Their fingers almost touched, but the river jerked her away again. The vortex pulled at them both. Evan felt the suction dragging him backward. It felt like an invisible hand trying to claim them. He kicked downward with everything he had. His lungs burned. His heart pounded. He pushed past the pull of the vortex and forced himself closer to her. When he reached her this time, he grabbed her wrist. Her skin felt cold and trembling. She gasped in shock when she felt his grip. Evan pulled her toward him and kept her head above the water. She clung to him tightly. For a moment he felt relief. But the river did not care about their victory. It slammed into them again and dragged them toward a sharp bend where a deadly drop waited. The roar of falling water echoed like thunder. It grew louder with every second. The girl cried out as she looked behind him. Evan turned his head and saw the danger. The river ahead opened into a wide cliff where water crashed into a rocky basin far below. If they reached that point, they would not survive. Evan needed to act fast. He looked around and spotted a massive tree trunk stretched across part of the river like a bridge broken in half. It leaned over the water with thick branches dipping downward. If he could reach one of those branches, he might pull them out of the current. He shifted his grip on the girl and kicked harder than before. His body screamed in pain. His muscles burned with every movement, yet he refused to give up. The branch was only a few arm lengths away. He reached for it and missed. The river dragged them closer to the cliff. Spray from the waterfall hit their faces. Evan growled through clenched teeth and tried again. He reached with every ounce of strength he had left. His fingers brushed the branch. He pushed forward once more and finally caught it. The branch bent under their combined weight, but did not break. Evan tightened his grip and pulled the girl upward. The current fought him and tried to drag them down. But he refused to let go. Every moment felt like a battle against the planet itself. Finally, he managed to pull the girl onto the leaning trunk. She coughed and gasped, but she was breathing. Evan climbed after her and collapsed beside her. They were shaking from cold and exhaustion, yet alive. The river roared below them as if angered by their escape. The spiral gates spun behind them in dark fury. And above them the distant crash site still burned with blue light. Evan looked at the girl. She looked back with wide, trembling eyes. Neither spoke, but both understood one truth. Their fight was far from over. Evan lay across the fallen tree trunk with the alien girl beside him. Both of them shook from cold and shock. Their breath rose in thin white clouds. The river roared below like a wild beast waiting for another victim. Evan knew they had escaped. One danger, but more trouble waited around them. The girl stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. Her small fingers still clung to his arm, as if she feared he might vanish if she let go. Evan gave her a soft nod to calm her. She tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. Her voice trembled with fear and exhaustion. Evan did not understand her words, but he understood her fear. He looked around the riverbank and searched for a way out. The tree trunk leaned dangerously. If they stayed too long, it might break. They needed solid ground. A cluster of rocks formed a natural staircase near the water. If he moved carefully, he could lead her across them. But the current below was still violent. One wrong step would drag them both back into the deadly current. Evan breathed slowly and tried to steady his mind. He had survived worse situations in his life, yet this felt different. This time another life depended on him completely. He stood up slowly and helped the girl rise. She wobbled and almost fell. Evan caught her quickly. She looked so fragile, yet she had survived a crash and a deadly river. Her courage impressed him, but she would not survive another fall. He decided to move first and guide her step by step. He placed his foot on the first rock. It shook under the river spray but held. He stepped to the next. When he looked back, the girl followed him carefully. Her small feet moved with quiet fear. Evan encouraged her with a gentle look. She nodded and advanced again. They made it halfway. Before danger returned without warning, a sudden surge of water smashed against the rocks. The force pushed the girl sideways. She slipped and screamed as she fell. Evan reacted instantly and dove toward her. His hands grabbed her wrist just before she dropped into the rushing water again. But the force of her fall pulled him down with her. The world spun into cold chaos. The river swallowed them both in a violent pull. Evan held the girl tightly as the water dragged them downstream. The current tossed them like broken branches. He tried to keep her head above water, but the waves hammered them with merciless strength. They were heading toward the same cliff they tried to avoid earlier. The thunder of falling water grew louder and louder. The sound filled Evan's ears like a warning from nature itself. The girl cried out in fear. Evan looked ahead and saw the cliff edge only seconds away. Panic surged in his chest. He searched for anything to grab, rocks, branches, roots, anything, but the river moved too fast. Then he saw it. A giant root from an ancient tree hung over the river. It stretched out like a hand offering one final chance. Evan moved with pure instinct. He twisted his body and kicked with every ounce of strength he had. The movement pushed them toward the hanging root, but the river kept pulling them back. He shouted in effort and reached out his hand. The girl clung to him with both arms. His fingertips brushed the root but slipped. The river dragged them closer to the edge. Spray shot up into the air. Evan felt the drop waiting to claim them. He refused to give up. He reached again and this time caught the root. The force nearly tore his shoulder apart. Pain shot through his arm like fire, but he did not let go. He tightened his grip and wrapped his other arm around it. The girl held onto him with desperate strength. The root bent under their weight. Evan used his legs to push against the water and pull them upward. Every movement felt slow and painful. But he climbed the route inch by inch. His muscles trembled. His body felt like it might collapse at any moment. The river tried to pull them back again and again. But Evan kept fighting. Finally, he pulled himself and the girl onto a patch of rocky ground beside the river. They collapsed together in the mud. Evan gasped for air and felt his chest ache. The girl coughed and shivered, but she was alive. Both were. Evan looked up at the sky, which burned with blue smoke from the crashed shuttle. He began to understand something important. This girl was not just lost. She was connected to whatever had fallen from the sky. And that meant danger might be following them. The girl looked at him with deep gratitude. Her eyes shimmered with emotion he did not understand fully. She placed her hand over her heart. Then she touched his chest. A simple gesture, but powerful. It felt like a promise. Evan understood. Their journey was not over. It had just begun. Evan lay on the riverbank with the alien girl beside him. Both of them shook from cold and exhaustion. The roar of the waterfall thundered behind them like a reminder of how close they came to death. The air around them filled with the sharp smell of wet stone and broken earth. Evan took a long breath and tried to steady his thoughts. The girl was alive. That was all that mattered at that moment. She opened her eyes slowly. Her skin glowed with a faint light that flickered like a dying flame. She looked weak but conscious. Evan brushed the wet hair away from her face. She watched him with tired gratitude and whispered something in her own language. Even though he did not understand the words, he could feel the meaning. She trusted him. Evan looked around. They were still far from safety. The burning crash site smoked in the distance. Strange sparks rose into the air like glowing insects. Whatever fell from the sky might still explode. The forest animals stayed silent, as if they feared the place. Evan knew they needed to move before something else went wrong. He stood and tried to lift the girl. She winced in pain. Her leg looked bruised and swollen. She would not be able to walk far. Evan knew he had to carry her. He bent down and helped her onto his back. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders gently. Her grip was light but steady. Evan felt her trust again, and it pushed him to keep moving. The path upward was steep and slippery. Mud clung to his boots as he climbed. Every step felt heavy. The river below kept roaring like a warning that wanted to follow him. Trees towered overhead with long shadows stretching across the ground. The air felt colder than before. He climbed slowly because one slip could send them tumbling back into the deadly water. Halfway up the slope, Evan heard a sound that made him freeze. A deep echoing hum filled the air. It vibrated through the ground. The girl reacted instantly. She tensed and buried her face into Evan's shoulder. Her body shook with fear. Evan understood the sound must be connected to her people. Or worse, to whatever caused the crash. He crouched behind a large rock and listened closely. The hum grew louder. The trees parted slightly as a strange craft moved through the forest air. It floated without wings. Its silver surface reflected the river below. Blue lights circled its frame in steady pulses. The craft searched for something. Or someone. The girl whispered again. Her voice trembled. Evan felt her breath on his neck. She feared the craft. That meant it was not her people. Something else was searching for her. Evan tightened his grip and moved deeper into the forest. The hum followed. The craft moved slowly, as if sniffing the air for her presence. Evan ducked under branches and stepped across broken roots. The girl clung to him with silent panic. The hum drew closer again. Blue lights flashed between the trees. Evan spotted a fallen log, covered in thick moss. He slid behind it and crouched low. The girl pressed against his back. Evan could feel her trembling. He placed a hand over hers. She relaxed slightly. The craft passed above them. Blue lights scanned the area in sweeping curves. Evan held his breath until the craft drifted past the tree line. Only then did he rise and continue moving. He reached a hill that offered a safer path. But the climb was difficult with the girl on his back. His legs felt weak. His vision blurred from exhaustion. Yet he pushed forward because stopping meant death. He reached the top of the hill and placed the girl gently beside a thick tree. She leaned against the trunk and tried to sit upright. Her skin glowed a little brighter now. She looked at him with soft gratitude. Before Evan could rest, the ground shook again. This time the sound came from behind them. Evan turned and saw a group of large figures moving through the forest. Their bodies glowed with blue armor. Their long arms ended in sharp crystal blades. Their eyes burned with cold light. They looked nothing like the girl. Their presence felt hostile. Their steps were slow and heavy as they scanned the ground with deadly focus. The girl gasped and hid behind Evan. Her voice cracked in fear. Evan stepped in front of her, even though he had no weapons. His body hurt. His mind felt dizzy. But he stood tall because he had to protect her. The figures approached. Their glowing blades brightened. Evan felt danger closing in around them. Then, the girl did something unexpected. She reached forward and touched his chest again, the same gesture she gave near the river. But this time her touch released a soft pulse of violet light that spread across his skin like a shield. Evan stared in shock as his body glowed faintly. The girl whispered something that sounded like hope. Evan did not understand what she said. But he understood one thing clearly. He was no longer just trying to save her. Now he was standing between a child and her enemies, and he was ready to fight. Evan stood in front of the trembling alien girl with nothing but his body to shield her. The glowing crystal-bladed creatures moved through the trees with slow and steady steps. Their armor shone with sharp blue light that flickered like lightning. Trapped under metal skin, they looked powerful and dangerous. Each footstep made the ground vibrate. They were hunters, and they were closing in. Evan clenched his fists. He felt the faint violet glow on his chest where the girl had touched him. It hummed softly like a heartbeat that did not belong to him. He did not understand why it happened, yet he knew it came from her. Maybe it was a message. Maybe it was a bond. Whatever it was, he felt stronger because of it. Not physically, but inside. His courage grew. The girl peeked from behind him. Her eyes widened with fear when she saw the armored creatures spreading out to surround them. She whispered a word. Her voice cracked with fear. Evan did not understand the language, but he understood the meaning. She said enemy. Evan took a step back to keep her behind him. His feet planted firmly in the dirt. His heart pounded hard. He had no weapon. He had no protection. Yet he refused to move. He would not allow those creatures to reach her. The lead creature lifted its crystal blade. Blue sparks danced along the edges. It pointed the blade toward Evan and let out a deep growling sound. It was not a roar. It was a warning, a command. Move aside or die. Evan did not move. The creature growled louder and stepped closer. Evan watched. Its eyes, they held no mercy, no hesitation. It was ready to strike. Evan knew that if he failed here, the girl would be taken or killed. He straightened his back and raised his hands. He prepared for a fight he could not win. Yet the courage inside him did not shake. Just when the creature swung its blade, the forest exploded with a new sound. A booming echo rolled across the trees. The armored creatures froze. Their glowing blades dimmed. The girl gasped and clung to Evan. From the far side of the forest, a group of tall figures emerged. Their bodies shimmered with soft violet energy. Their armor curved like living stone, decorated with patterns of glowing silver. They carried staffs made of crystal and metal. The tips burned with bright purple flame. Each step they took released a pulse of energy that spread across the trees. These new figures moved with calm confidence. They did not hurry. They did not show fear. Their presence alone pushed the crystal-bladed hunters backward. The girl cried out with sudden joy. She called to them with trembling hope. Evan turned his head slightly and saw her eyes fill with relief. These were her people. One of the Violet Guardians stepped forward. He was taller than the others. His armor shone brighter. His eyes glowed with warm light. He lifted his staff and spoke in a deep, steady voice that echoed across the forest. Evan did not understand the words, but the tone made the meaning clear. A command to the hunters. Leave. The hunters did not obey at first. They growled and lifted their blades. But when the guardian hammered his staff into the ground, a shockwave burst outward. The hunters stumbled. Their blue lights flickered. One by one they retreated into the trees without a final glance. Soon their blue glow disappeared from sight, and the forest grew quiet again. The girl stepped away from Evan and ran toward the Violet Guardians. One knelt and opened his arms. She collapsed into his embrace with relief. He held her carefully and examined her bruises. When he looked at Evan, his eyes widened. The Guardian stood tall and spoke to the others. They turned their gaze toward Evan. Their expressions changed from alert to shocked respect. They stepped back and lowered their weapons as a sign of honor. Evan felt confused. He looked around trying to understand what they saw. Then he noticed the violet glow on his chest spreading outward like a soft aura. The girl had given him a protective mark. To them that mark meant something powerful. The leader approached Evan. Slowly, he placed a hand over his chest and bowed his head. The others followed. Evan felt overwhelmed. He had saved a child, but he did not expect this kind of reaction. The girl ran back to Evan and took his hand. She looked up at him with shining eyes. She spoke a single word in her soft voice. Savior. Evan's heart tightened. He did not feel like a savior. He had simply done what felt right. But the Guardians looked at him as if he had performed a miracle. The leader touched the ground with his staff. A bright doorway of light opened before them. The girl tugged on Evan's hand. She wanted him to follow. Evan took one deep breath and stepped into the light with her. He did not know it yet, but this moment would change everything. Evan stepped into the glowing doorway with the alien girl holding his hand. A wave of warm energy passed over his skin as the light swallowed them. His vision blurred for a moment, then cleared to reveal a world that felt ancient and sacred. They stood inside a vast circular chamber carved from smooth violet stone. Soft crystal lanterns glowed along the walls like stars floating in the air. The floor shimmered with symbols that pulsed gently beneath their feet. The girl's guardians surrounded them. Their armor reflected the crystal light and made them appear as if they carried fragments of the sky. They guided Evan deeper inside the chamber with slow, respectful movements. They did not speak loudly. They did not rush. Each step felt like part of a ritual that had existed for centuries. The girl stayed close to Evan's side. She still held his hand tightly. Her trembling had stopped, and now she looked calm, safe. She glanced at him with quiet trust as if he belonged here with her. Evan was unsure of anything in this strange place, yet her presence gave him courage. At the center of the chamber stood a tall platform made of crystal. On it rested a glowing sphere that pulsed like a living heart. The Guardians formed a circle around Evan and the girl. The leader approached and placed his staff on the ground. The sphere shifted in color. It changed from bright violet to deep gold. Evan felt a warm breeze sweep through the chamber. He did not know how it was possible underground, yet the air moved with gentle comfort. The girl stepped forward and pointed at Evan. Her voice echoed softly as she spoke. Evan did not understand her words, but the tone carried meaning. She was telling them how he saved her. The Guardians listened. Their faces softened. Some lowered their heads. Others pressed their palms to their chests in a gesture of deep respect. When she finished speaking, she turned to Evan and touched the mark glowing on his chest. The violet light spread across the chamber. The floor symbols brightened. The sphere pulsed faster. The leader raised his staff and spoke in a deep voice that filled the room. It was a chant. A declaration. Evan could not understand the language, but he felt the weight of it. The guardians repeated the chant. Their voices rose in powerful harmony. The chamber vibrated with the sound. The girl stepped beside Evan and lifted his hand. She placed it over her heart, then over the symbol glowing on the floor. Her eyes shimmered. She looked at him as if she wanted him to understand something important. Something that went beyond language. The leader struck his staff against the floor. A beam of golden light rose from the sphere and wrapped around Evan like a warm cloud. The girl stood inside the light with him. Her glow brightened until she looked almost like a star. Evan felt overwhelmed. He tried to speak, but the words stuck. In his throat, the light pulsed again and filled his vision. The guardian leader walked forward and placed his hand over Evan's heart. He spoke another phrase. This time the tone held gratitude, honor, and something deeper. Recognition. Evan realized what was happening. This was not a simple thank you. This was a ceremony, a sacred one. They believed he had performed a heroic act blessed by destiny. Saving a child from the river of death was something only legend spoke of. And he had done it as a human, a species they barely understood. The sphere pulsed once more. A final burst of gold wrapped around him and the girl. When it faded, the guardians all knelt, their heads lowered. Their staffs crossed over their chests. Evan stood frozen. He had never seen anything like this. He felt both humbled and confused. He did not feel like a savior. He felt like a man who made a hard choice because a child needed help. But to them that choice meant everything. The girl stepped forward and bowed her head to him. She placed her hand on his chest in the same gentle gesture she used before. This time the meaning was clear even without words. She was honoring him. Evan swallowed hard. His heart felt heavy yet warm. He looked around the chamber filled with glowing stone and kneeling guardians. Then he looked at the girl who now saw him as something greater than a rescuer, a symbol, a protector, a savior. Evan did not know what future awaited him among these people, but he knew one truth now. His life would never return to the simple, quiet path he once walked. He had stepped into legend. Evan stood in the sacred chamber, surrounded by glowing crystal walls and kneeling guardians. The golden light from the sphere faded slowly, but its warmth stayed inside him. He felt changed, though he could not explain how. The alien girl who had almost died in the wild river now looked at him with shining eyes filled with deep respect. She no longer saw him as a stranger. She saw him as a symbol of hope. The guardians rose from their kneeling position. Their armor hummed softly as they approached Evan with calm movements. The leader stepped forward and touched his staff to the ground. A circular door opened behind the crystal platform, revealing a path of stone that led upward through a spiral tunnel. The leader looked at Evan and nodded. It was an invitation. They wanted him to follow. The girl walked beside him and held his hand again. She guided him with gentle steps. Her legs still hurt, but she stayed strong. As they walked through the tunnel, the crystals embedded in the walls reacted to their presence and brightened with soft violet light. The air felt warm and filled with a sweet scent like blooming flowers. The tunnel opened into a wide balcony overlooking the alien city, hidden deep within the mountains. Evan stared in awe. Towers made of living stone rose like giant trees. Bridges shimmered between them with flowing streams of purple energy. Floating lanterns drifted through the air like gentle fireflies. The sky above glowed with 3 moons hanging close enough to cast long shadows across the city. He had never seen anything so beautiful. A group of citizens waited below the balcony. They were smaller than the guardians but shared the same glowing eyes and smooth violet skin. When they saw the girl, they cried out with joy. Murmurs spread quickly across the crowd. They pointed at Evan. Their eyes widened in wonder. Some bowed. Others placed their hands over their hearts. Evan felt overwhelmed. Again, He did not know how to respond. The guardians guided him down a curved staircase carved into the stone. As Evan stepped onto the city ground, the citizens formed a path for him. They whispered softly. They watched him with gratitude and amazement. Evan could not understand their language, yet he knew they were honoring him. His rescue had become a story spreading faster than he could imagine. The leader guardian raised his staff high. A deep tone echoed across the city. Every citizen fell silent. The girl stepped forward and spoke. Her voice carried through the air with surprising strength. She told her people what happened at the river. She described the crash, the fear, the moment she thought she would die. She spoke of the human who jumped into the deadly waters without hesitation, how he fought the current, how he saved her from the spiral gate, how he protected her against the hunters. The citizens listened with wide eyes. Some gasped. Others pressed their hands to their chests in shock. When she finished, she turned to Evan. She stepped closer and bowed deeply. The crowd followed her movement. Thousands bowed to the human who risked his life for one of their children. Evan felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He did not see himself as a hero. He saw himself as a man who did what felt right. Yet these people believed he had shown something powerful, something rare, a kind of courage they did not expect from humans. The leader guardian touched Evan's shoulder. He spoke slowly, as if trying to choose words Evan might understand. Then he pressed the glowing end of his staff against Evan's chest. A new mark appeared there. It shined with golden light. It was a symbol of honor, a symbol given only to legendary protectors of their world. The crowd erupted in soft songs. Their voices rose like gentle wind across the mountains. The girl walked to Evan's side and held his hand once more. She looked at him not with fear or dependence, but with pride. She knew her world had gained something rare, a protector from another species, a savior born not from prophecy, but by choice. Evan looked across the glowing city. The stars above seemed to shine brighter. He felt a strange calm grow inside him. He did not know what challenges would come next. He did not know what threats still roamed the mountains. But he knew this. His life now belonged to more than himself. His courage had created a legend, and the legend had just begun.